Now, there's no doubt that our textbook is an amazing resource. I've already walked you through all the many great things that you can find in this textbook: explanatory notes, maps, illustration guides, interpretations, facsimiles. It's just amazing what's in there. But there's actually another really extraordinary resource about Mark Twain that we're going to use a lot, and I want to encourage you to connect to and be aware about as you construct your first paper later in the course. And it's called Mark Twain and His Times, in his times, and it was put together by Stephen Railton, who's one of the leading scholars of mid-19th century American literature. He's a Twain scholar, and he's also a scholar in Harriet Beecher Stowe's work, and also has a phenomenal website about her. Anyway, let's take a quick look here. This is an overview of the site. So he really explores a large set of Twain's most significant works. But for each of these works, there's a separate web page that focuses just on that text. And this is where things get phenomenal. He has pulled together, and his students have pulled together an amazing collection of resources. I want to point out, as you're probably reading, Railton places the publication of the book in January of 1885, as opposed to our text, which sees it, depicts it coming out in late 84. I'm not really sure of the contours of that dispute. Either year is fine for me as far as whatever you want to cite when you're working with it. Anyway, if we look at his Huck Finn page, he's got a list of about 10 different links to different things, and they are phenomenal. I encourage you to go through them. I particularly find interesting, and will probably ask you to look at later, the representations of Jim piece that he has in here, where he looks at how various artists have represented him. He has a really interesting discussion of slavery in Twain's works as a whole, beyond Huck Finn, also useful. The relationship between illustrations, class, and gender, very interesting discussion of these illustrations and what sort of cultural assumptions about race and gender they reveal. Big collection of contemporary views, illustrations from like 8 of the major different editions of Huck Finn. This is a really cool thing. You can go into the text of Huck Finn, type in a word or phrase, and find all the places it appears in the text. It's really phenomenal, really terrific resource. The advertising Twain put together for the text is fascinating. He was very, very involved in the marketing of his material. And the sale prospectus is a lot of fun too, because it mixes in Twain's own material with how the company that publishes work was going to present him. But what I want to look at quickly today is the sources and pretext for Huck Finn. It's an important part of Clemens Twain's mythology that he was an original, right? That he was this great American original voice. And we heard a little bit of that hagiography in the little video that I asked you to watch earlier in this Huck Finn lecture. But we have to be careful of confusing genius for originality, in the sense that Twain was working from some very established traditions, and his use of dialect, for example, had been done before. The types of stories he was focusing on, in many ways, had their own genres. And if you look at the sources and pretext for Huck Finn page, it kind of visually represents some of the major dynamics. I've already talked about in this lecture blackface minstrelsy and the problematics of Twain's engagement with that in terms of how he presents Jim. And we're going to return to that again in the chapters that we're going to discuss after this video. So that's an important context that we're going to want to explore more fully. Also, however, Twain was deeply interested by Southwest humor, and as we encounter the chapters that are really invested in that later, we'll return to this lecture and share some material from here. And another tradition that he engages with, in this case, more commenting upon, I would argue, than replicating, are the Southern plantation tales, which were very popular in the post-Reconstruction era in American culture and history. And then you've got sort of the two early Twain stories, the Jumping Frog of Calaveras County, I believe is the official title, and over here, another work called The True Story. Those we probably won't get to. We're going to be more interested in minstrelsy, Southwest humor, and plantation tales. Before you leave me to go on, let's take a look at the blackface minstrelsy section. I really want you to take the time to read through this discussion. In particular, as Railton walks us through the relationship between Twain's narrative, the illustrations, and Twain's depictions of Jim. And then on the bottom here, there are some sort of classic minstrelsy type dialogues. And these were comic performances that were done during, live shows in the Reconstruction and post-Reconstruction era. And then eventually this kind of stuff actually makes its way onto American radio in the early 20th century. So these exchanges are interesting to look at because there's at least two moments in Adventures of Huckleberry Finn where Twain seems to very much be playing off these. And the question is, how much does he play off them and how much is he himself enamored of them and perpetuating sort of the racism of them? So I'm going to ask you to read through these pretty carefully when we move on to chapter 8 in the text and take a good look at Railton's relatively brief but really helpful discussion about blackface minstrelsy. So this is just one example of how important this resource is going to be to helping us understand Huck Finn. Okay, see you in Blackboard.